Cairo, Seattle.
It's time to get schooled with the professor, John Clayton.
Welcome to Schooled with the Professor, and boy, what an education we're going to be able to get today, because we're talking to Pat Kirwan, host. Of course, I love being able to fill in with Pat when Jim Miller's not there, and just talk football for 4 hours. And of course, he's on Movin The Chains, which is on Sirius XM NFL radio from 12 West Coast time to 4. And Pat, it's great to be with you.
John, it's always great to be with you. I loved our show Saturday. And a lot of people like when you and I are together doing this, so I'm looking very much forward to what we're going to do right now on this podcast.
Well, it's perfect to be able to talk to you at the mid-season mark, because we just got to kind of review the season, of course, the education of what is going on the field. Because I think the one concern that I have about is the scoring in the National Football League, offensive scoring, because it's down for about the third, fourth straight year. Technically, it's 43.9 points a game, where 2 years ago it was 47. But realistically, offensive scoring is down to about maybe 20.2 points per game per team, with 232 touchdown runs last year, 185 this year. Touchdown passes down 411 to 394. Pat, what are we seeing as far as decreased scoring in the NFL?
Yeah, we've got a bunch of AFC teams. I think 9 of them, John, averaging under 20 points a game. It's almost incomprehensible. So I think you're all over one of the big subjects. Now, the NFL has done many things, as you know better than anybody, to change the rules to encourage offense. But we also trained all the fans, and this is a Bill Cowherism, we also trained them to think if there's not a lot of scoring, it's not a good game. Where Bill likes to say there's something beautiful about a defensive battle and there's nothing wrong with 6-3. But the fans in this country want to see scoring, and it's down. Okay, what's ironic to this, John, and you and I talked about this prior to this show, was that deep shots are up. Almost every quarterback deep throws per game are up from last year, so they're trying to take it down the field. If you go back to the days before the West Coast offense, short pass attack, regularly good quarterbacks were 50% completion guys because they took a lot of deep shots. So I think the deep shot game, which is somewhat new to some of these quarterbacks, has got a level of incompletions that some of the guys are at 35% completion. So if you're taking deep shots and you're not completing them, you are wasting it down, and that's part of it. The second part of it is this league got younger and younger and younger, and that's okay on defense where running hits a priority, but on offense, I think it's been a mistake because it takes a while to develop guys. And then finally this, John, this is another great weekend to prove your point about why scoring is down. Look at all the backup quarterbacks that are going to play, and those guys are notorious for not being able to score a lot of points, and we're going to see a bunch of them on the field this week, so I don't expect scoring to go up very much. And you just think about the names. Beathard's playing again, Osweiler, Hundley, Savage, Keenum's back on the field, Stanton, Bissett, Pitts. I don't expect a lot of scoring from them, do you?
No, you don't. And don't you use the axiom that if you bring in a backup quarterback, let's say you've got Aaron Rodgers, you expect to score 28, 30 points a game. Now you bring in a backup. A good backup may get you 20 to 21. And right now, Brett Hundley's getting the Packers 17. That's quite the drop-off.
John, I think, and you're the man who does the research, but I believe that when you go to a backup quarterback, you are at least a touchdown less in scoring per game with the backup. And that's over a long period of time with a lot of names. So if you just knock the 28 points a game guy down to 20, 21, you get the problem we're in. And if you become worse than that, you start to see why the numbers are down all over the place. And I don't think they're going to go up, John. I just don't think they are. And as I said, you got too many young players that can't sustain 10-play drives. It's one thing when Bill Walsh invents his version and really the West Coast offense, and they're going to drive the offense with short passing attack, and they're okay with 10 and 12-play drives when your quarterback's Montana or Young. Try to run that kind of concept with these young quarterbacks. They can't run 10-play drives without a breakdown. So I look at all those things add up to what the story is here. I don't want to see any more rules to help offenses. I'd like to see players kept longer and look at the offensive line. Maybe that's the last place we should go, John. Have you and I discussed literally every team in the NFL has an offensive line issue or two or three? I mean, it's pathetic how bad the offensive lines are. So how are you going to score points if you don't have a line?
No question. And that's, I think, because I know we go over it, and we pretty well think that 2/3 of the offensive lines in the league are no good. And I thought you came up with the best idea in the sense is that maybe you have 8 to 10, and maybe we're stretching to say 10, but then there's a big cliff and a big drop-off after that once you get into the 10s and 12s and 13s.
Yeah, it's here's how the great coaches think, and you're out there with Pete and those guys, and they've got offensive lines problems everywhere, but the smart coaches don't whine about any of this stuff. The smart coaches are trying to figure out how to create an advantage for themselves and where are we going to get our points from. And so I pay attention to those kind of things in the second half of the season, especially teams that have had a bye and a real chance to look at themselves. I'm waiting to see modified behaviors from these offenses. Hey, sometimes you got to admit my line's not very good. So drop back passing, 5-step drop is out. You can't do it because we can't protect. Last night we see Balaga go down again in Green Bay. They can't be running the same pace as Hundley that they ran with Rodgers, so I think you'll see them try to figure out and modify what they're doing. Hopefully, for those who like scoring, it'll lead to more scoring, I hope. But for me, I kind of like these games in 2017, but I'm the oddball, John.
Yeah. I'll tell you, the one thing, when you talk about a rule change, and before the game I ran into Bruce Allen, president of the Washington Redskins. They've now, and this is a classic example, the Redskins had only dressed 44 players for the game and literally had 43 because Brandon Sheriff has a knee injury and he wasn't going to play. He was just going to be an emergency guy. They had 11 offensive linemen. 5 of them did not play. They literally only had one backup. It's time, in this case, I think, with the Redskins against the Seahawks, to try to expand the active roster. 50, 51, 52, 53, whatever it is. But the idea of going in with 45 players, it just doesn't work.
It doesn't work, and we're seeing signs and symptoms of that problem on Thursday Night Football. I track who wins and who loses. I've done it for a long time. The league can say what they want. When you get to week 5, after week 5, heading into week 6, and start looking at who wins the games, and a lot of it's because you don't have enough players that can handle it, you start to realize that it is about trying to travel with 45, 46 guys. You can't do it. I've interviewed many owners. I'll name them: Stephen Jones, Bob McNair, Bob Kraft. Those guys are all in favor of expanded game day roster. Bob McNair had the best idea because we got all these guys sitting on a practice squad. So we got to liberalize those rules so you can bring that guy up right away and send him right back down, and we could do this. But why don't they start with Thursday Night Football where we go to 50-man roster? And they could do that this week. Why do they wait? Start looking at all the visiting teams that can't win, and you'll start to realize 10 of the 11 in 2016 road teams after week 6, I believe, lost. 8 of 11 of the year before. We've had 3 losing road teams in a row. Miami looked asleep when they lost 40-0. Buffalo looked terrible. So it's time, and this idea we're going to keep waiting for the off season. You and I watched that competition committee. They're not going to run that through. They just keep pushing that thing away. I was told one thing, John, and I'll get off. They said they don't want to expand the roster because coaches will come up with more things like nickel, dime, big nickel, big dime. And I said, well, what do you care what they're doing? How about enough bodies that when the concussion protocol throws guys out, we have someone who can take their place? So you're talking to a guy that believes totally in what you think, and the league better start paying attention because the product is not good right now, and there's not enough good offensive players to score.
No, and you can also see it's like, okay, you want to keep expanding different ideas, playing in London, and you see there's a carriage problem going over there. I mean, a team like Baltimore just was totally not prepared to go against a Ram team or any team that was going to have been there before. So they get blown out by Jacksonville. And so Arizona goes over, they play the Rams, and they weren't ready to do it. There's now, if you're going to do this, have more players available. I was standing on the sidelines in the Seahawks game watching the Redskins, and literally they were going to have to take tight ends and defensive tackles in an emergency situation and put them on the offensive line, and they had other positions where they had to take guys in other positions and move them over. It was crazy.
And think about how nuts that is from a business perspective. You're already into the double franchise tag on Cousins. you're going to pay this guy $25 million, and then you're not going to have the players to protect him. Doesn't make any sense. So I wonder who it's going to take to put that proposal in that they're going to listen to him and do it. And as I said, sometimes they should admit their mistakes and fix them on the spot. Like, do you think the union is going to fight a 50-man game day roster?
No, not at all. Talking to Pat Kirwan. Okay, so now other suggestions that you think that would make the game better?
Yeah, to make the game better. Boy, that's a good question. First off, we better get some of the nasty violence that's now creeping into the game. This subject's been bothering me all week. It's a hot topic in this sense. You don't fine or suspend Sue who puts a chokehold on Mallett. Okay, I don't care if the message is subliminal or obvious. Players this week took more liberties in the area of that. So now we're going to finally eject Big Mike down in Tampa, but we're not ejecting and suspending, A.J. Green this week. There's an inconsistency. We need consistency in the rules. And when they said that Park Avenue is going to have final say on stuff, they typically screwed it up. They should have say over everything. They should be able to stop a game and say, this is bad for the NFL. Get that player off the field now. And Jameis Winston coming off the sideline and tapping a player from another team, gave him the suspension as soon as his arm's better to play. So I do think Park Avenue needs to take a stronger hold of this because the inconsistencies have driven the fans crazy. Secondly, if we can't admit that we need a minor league to develop linemen and quarterbacks, we're lying to ourselves. Go back to the days of Kurt Warner, Jimmy Miller, Jake Delhomme, one after another that came back to the NFL and could play. I'll also take you to Matt Lepsis, a tight end, an average to mediocre tight end, goes to NFL Europe, becomes a left tackle, and is the left tackle for a couple of Super Bowls. We need a developmental league. We need Park Avenue to take a stronger hold of the rules. Those two things alone, to me, are going to help quite a bit.
Oh, yeah, because, you saw like Jake Delhomme, John Kitna, quarterbacks developed over there. And what you're seeing, particularly if you have a quarterback on a team that doesn't get injured or at least doesn't come off the field, they'll sit for 4 years like Ryan Nassib and never play a down, and then they're 26 years old and they're out of the league. They're not developing. Yeah. And this is the worst group of backup quarterbacks I can remember, and that's because they're not getting a chance to develop.
Beathard and Hundley and Savage, a classic example. His first year, you could have sent him to NFL Europe. He could have played 10 games, dealt with pass rush, and by the time you get around to him this time, he has played. Think about all these guys. Bissett is the third in New England. He could have been in NFL Europe playing games, but believe me, I don't even know if I want the league. In fact, I don't want the league in Europe. What I really want is a fall league in the United States with games played on Tuesdays. Why? So when I need to call up Bissett because I need him, I can don't play him tonight. We're bringing him back. We're going to call him up and put him on the active roster. He's in game shape right now. He's playing football. He's been in real games, and I can activate him and put him on my squad on Wednesday morning. I mean, to me, that makes sense. And Tuesday night football in a minor league sense, I go to a lot of minor league hockey, and I go to a lot of minor league baseball, and it's a nice product. And the guy, the family with a couple of kids who can't afford an NFL game, he can get involved in that. And I think you could strategically put it in the right city. So that's a big pet peeve of mine, and it's falling on deaf ears.
Okay, let's look at the NFC. How much do you believe in the Philadelphia Eagles, and will they be able to sustain what they're doing?
Oh, I do believe in them, number one. Number two, sustainability, that's a function of injury, which is everyone's issue. And if they stay healthy, fine. But they've got a big mad dog on that defensive line in Fletcher Cox who wreaks havoc, and he changes the protections, which now they're smart enough to see where they can bring free players. They have 7-man wave for the defensive line, which is terrific, which is you almost need it in his one-gap 4-man fronts where you stunting and penetrating. But they also could incur an injury or two there and still be pretty good. Wentz, I love him. But, the big games are coming, the playoffs. It's always tough on these young quarterbacks. You and I have watched a lot of good young ones not be able to close the door in a playoff game. So I think they'll get there. They'll get a home game for sure. They might win that, but if they have to go out on the road, I think that could be a stumbling block. And I also think a team like Seattle, with a lot of seasoned veterans, could come in and play them in the playoffs and cause some problems for them. But I think they can go pretty far. I think it's success written all over this team for this year.
How do you look at Seattle right now? Tough loss to the Redskins. They dropped now to 5-3. Still got a good defense, offense. They can't run the ball. Where do you see the Seahawks?
Yeah, well, they have some problems that haven't been resolved, and they're more than a year long. The offensive line was bad last year. They're bad again this year. If you just said if Russell Wilson couldn't run, would they win any games? Because it's really down to him in his 2-minute mode, and that's why they actually have a great success in fourth quarters, and they have comebacks, et cetera. So without the line, which now has rippled into they don't have a running game, part of that's that the running backs are not dynamic to the level that Lynch was when he was in his prime. So they don't have a run game, they don't have pass protection, and last week they didn't have Earl. And you play cover 3 as much as they do. Earl is the one guy in the deep middle that can go sideline to sideline and knock down balls and pick off passes. So Earl, that was a temporary problem. The offensive problems are real and they're long-lasting. To me, I would look at myself and say, what's the one thing we do great in Seattle? Well, it's the 2-minute offense. It's the hurry up. It's basically to create plays with the quarterback. I would come out against Arizona on Thursday night and just do that. I would not be trying to establish a run, which they can't establish, or get into these crazy protections. Come out and go no huddle. Come out and get that tempo going from the beginning, and let's see if Drew Stanton could stay up with that. You could get a 2-touchdown lead. How often, and you're at every game, how often are they playing with a lead, John?
Very rare. I think that they've pretty much. I would say they probably are either even or behind more than 55% of the time.
And that alone is a reason to try something different. And I don't think there's anything wrong with coming out. We know that Russell can handle it. We know those receivers and their tight end can handle it. Take the pressure off the line. Get into something. Gas the pass rush. They're not gassing the pass rush in the first half, trying to run the ball. Go out there. Russell's not going to run out of gas, and his receivers won't either. Put the fatigue on that defensive line rushing you. Get them to line up without a huddle. Don't give them a chance to recover. Put the pedal down and try that. That would be my approach with them at this point.
How do you look at what Sean McVay has done with the Los Angeles Rams, and can they sustain their success?
Well, Sean has done a tremendous job, and I was not as sure as some that he could handle this right away the way he has. It's very impressive. So the first question I have is, how close were they last year? And then we just didn't know it because Goff wasn't ready. And Goff's improvement, some of it has to do with himself preparing and growing and getting stronger, which he did. And then some of it has to do with McVay. But some of it might be that just the maturation process. So I'm not here to condemn Jeff Fisher that he screwed it up. He was trying to play with a rookie quarterback who he said wasn't ready to start the season. So there's a nice blend of things going on here. They always had talent on defense. I'm really impressed with what Sean's done. I still think Seattle wins the division. They've already got a win over these guys, and the Rams have to come to them. So I would say they're a wild card, and I think they'll make it to the wild card round, and that'll be a gigantic step for them. And then next year we'll talk about them being a serious contender for the division and more than just making the playoffs.
And then finally, are you enjoying some of the creative stuff? Now, it's not going to happen again in Houston because Bill O'Brien doesn't have Deshaun Watson. But you're seeing, a lot of college-type plays that are being integrated in the league. Andy Reid's doing some. Doug Peterson's doing some. A little bit more of the creativity from college coming in, where before that just wasn't happening.
I love it, John, and I think it was necessity is the mother of invention. The NFL, they're not giving these coaches enough time to develop teams, so you got to try to play with what you have. They're young, and you got to try to win. And if you want to win early, I'll take you back to when Cam Newton came out. I'm sure you remember this. That was the lockout year, and Ron Rivera told me, I said, what'd you do to get the kid ready? Because he threw for 400 the first 2 games. He said, we went over to Auburn. and we said, show us his best 10 plays that he runs, that you know he loves. And they got him, and they just built their offense around it. And they found out that a big, strong guy could do it. I think the Redskins found out a skinny guy like Griffin can't do it without breaking down. So it is a function of medical risk when you run all this stuff, read option at the line of scrimmage, and the keeper's part of it. Now, last thing, Kansas City, last couple of weeks struggling, and the big reason there is I think defenses have figured out how to slow down and basically halt Kareem Hunt. Go look at his production for the last 4 weeks. Not very impressive. No touchdowns, 3 yards to carry. And so if you take that element out of it, and I think that's the first place defensive guys are looking, how do we stop that read dive and then force the quarterback to be the runner and then take your shots to knock him out of a game?
Pat, it is always great to talk to you. I feel so much educated every time I do it. But the great thing is, it's just fun. We're talking football,
Don,
and it's great.
It's just great being your friend. I've been your friend for a long time. So be well. Hope you invite me on again.
You got it, Pat. Thank you. And that does it for this week's podcast. In between episodes, you can follow me on Twitter at Clayton ESPN. If you enjoy these weekly one-on-one conversations, consider leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to the show. Thanks for listening. See you next time on Schooled with the Professor.